All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to the webinar for today, part of our NOACA webinar series. This one is called Manage Your Gmail. So we're going to be talking about lots of different things that you can do with your Gmail account to help you manage all of your messages that you get. We'll kind of start off with telling you a little bit about myself. I am going to be your host for this webinar. My name is Christy Hughes. I work at NOACA. I'm an educational technologist as well as a Google for Education certified trainer. I've been at NOACA now for 13 years, and prior to that, I was a classroom teacher. I have my contact information on that slide, so feel free to get in touch with me. If you have any questions after this webinar, or if you need some training with your district and so forth, we are always happy to help. Moving on to the next slide, some webinar housekeeping. If you've never been in one of our webinars before, I just want to remind you this webinar is set up so that you can see everything and hear everything through one device. So you don't need to use your phone to get connected. So hopefully you are able to hear my voice and also see my screen. If you have any questions, though, please feel free to unmute your microphone and go ahead and hop right in there with your question. Or we also have this chat box available. And right now, I'm going to go ahead and send out a chat just to make sure everybody gets that. If you don't have your chat box open yet, that will pop up and you will be able to see that. I also have with me today Chris Malanga, who works at NOACA as well. And in the participants list, he is labeled as the chat host. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to get in touch with him or myself, and we will be happy to help you with any questions that you have about getting connected or any questions about Gmail. So and last thing I'll just kind of say about the webinar housekeeping is if you'd like to follow along in your own Google account, you certainly can do that. Just go ahead and open up another tab in your browser. If you're using Google Chrome, just go ahead and click on that little the tab shape up at the top and go ahead and open up another tab so that you can work in your own Gmail account and then also see and hear me. All right, so next slide there. We'll go ahead and talk about, let me go on to the next one, our resources for Gmail. Now, this is just one Google Doc. That shortened link right there is one Google Doc that has, we call it a checklist. So it has a list of instructional videos about how to do various things in Gmail. You are welcome to use that checklist to watch any of those videos. Those videos are all housed out on YouTube. So they're just really, really short videos. I think maybe the longest one is like 5 minutes, maybe at the most. So we try to keep them short and sweet so that you can just kind of click around and learn without having to watch a really long video. So feel free to use that. As well as we have our whole training.noaca.org website available to you. And I took a picture of this slide. I have up at the top class materials is the tab that I have open. And that is where you'll see all the icons for all the different Google apps down below. That is where if you click on any one of those Google apps, you will be directed to the checklist once again for that particular Google app. And again, those checklists are all individual videos that we have done, our instructional services staff has done that are housed out on YouTube. So feel free to take advantage of that. All right, last couple things, and then we'll go ahead and get started with Gmail for today. And one of those things is I just want to talk for a second about our Tech Tuesday tips. The URL down at the bottom of the screen there allows you to go ahead and sign up for our Tech Tuesday tips. Now, this is completely free. You can sign up, and what happens every Tuesday, so today our Tech Tuesday tip just went out. Every Tuesday you will get an email in your inbox that just talks about something technology related that you can try in your classroom. Now, sometimes it's about Google, but not all the time. So it's usually just ways to save time, tech tips and tricks of, could be Gmail related, could be Google Classroom related. So lots of different ways that you can kind of get a little bit more organized, I guess, with technology. So feel free to sign up with that. Again, that is completely free. All right, and last thing before we get started with our Gmail for today is I just want to talk about our GEG of Northwest Ohio. Now, you probably saw in the corner of my screen, we have our NOWACA logo, which is down here, and then we also have the GEG of Northwest Ohio logo over here. And if you're not familiar with our GEG, that does stand for our Google Educators Group of Northwest Ohio, and we put on various events throughout the whole school year. The one that is coming up relatively soon is our Perrysburg location, and that is on March 7th. It is at the Perrysburg board office, and so I'm going to visit this website here in just a second. But that is the shortened link right there, that blue link. That is the shortened link to our event. This is totally free, completely free to member districts, free to other people that want to attend. We encourage you to attend, and if you'd like to present, we encourage you to do that too. We're just looking to get together with people to share ideas and learn from each other and collaborate. So like I said, this one is in March, and we have other events that are coming up this summer. So, you know, feel free to share that with other people, and again, that's totally free. So I'm going to hop out of this presentation real quick just to show you that on our website. This is our GEG of Northwest Ohio website. You can get here from that link that is in that presentation, but I'm going to scroll down here just for a second. It does have the date and the time and the location, and then down at the bottom there's two different forms. One is for registration to attend, and then the other one is for presenting. So again, feel free to share that with others. We encourage you to attend or present, and we look forward to seeing you possibly at our Perrysburg location for our GEG event. All right, so let me present this one more time, and we'll move on to the next slide, which is our objective for this webinar. Now, we are talking about Gmail, so the things that we're going to really be focusing on for this webinar is learn how to manage your Gmail account with filters, labels, settings, labs, and some other things. Now, it's important to recognize that, of course, you know, a lot of you are attending this webinar today because your school is a Google for Education school where you have your own domain, what we call. And so, like, you know, it may be at Springfield Local Schools or at Central Local or something like that. So it's also important to note that all of these things that I'm going to show you today, if you have a personal Gmail account where it's at gmail.com, all of these things are exactly the same. So if you watch me do filters and, you know, you're thinking to yourself, wow, that would be really helpful in my personal Gmail account, that will work also. This is not just for your education account. So just kind of keep that in mind as we go along. So with that said, we are going to hop into Gmail, and just before I hop out of this presentation, I'll just show you real quick some of the topics that we are going to cover. Of course, I mentioned the filters and the labs and the labels, but some other things we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about how you can tag messages as being important. We're going to talk about how to search your mail and how to go back and forth between your mail, contacts, and tasks. And lastly, Gmail offline, which is a real popular one because I think a lot of people don't really know about that. And then we're going to end with some of the extra features. So at that point, I'm going to go ahead and do a demo of Gmail. So I'm going to hop out of this, and I'm going to go into my Gmail account. And so if you've sat through one of our NOWACA webinars before, you know that we have some test users, and the test user that I'm using today is Wilma Flintstone. You can see her picture up in the top corner, so there she is. So she has a lot of mail. So she has 41 messages in her inbox, and she has a lot of messages that she hasn't even read yet. So this is a great account to use because we're going to be talking about doing all kinds of things and showing Wilma how to manage her Gmail account. And so with that said, one of the first things that we're going to talk about here, and I'm going to move this screen over here so I can get this out of the way. One of the first things that we're going to talk about here is the fact that you can toggle in between your mail, contacts, and tasks. And once again, this is one of those things that a lot of people really don't know. And so what I mean by that is right underneath your logo up at the top, if you're looking at your school Gmail account, right underneath that it says mail. Now, if you click on that little drop-down arrow, you get the option to click on mail, contacts, or tasks. And I'll always get this question of how do you set up a distribution list, or how do you set up a Google group, or how do you set up, you know, some kind of group where I can just type in one thing and have a message go out to 50 people. And this is where you can go ahead and do it. Now, this is not the only spot where you can go to access contacts. You can also go over to your apps launcher and find contacts over here. But sometimes if you're already in Mail, it's really helpful just to kind of click on that word Mail and click on Contacts. And when I do that, I'm able to see all the contacts that I have in my list, as well as here's my little search bar, so I can search my whole directory and find any students or teachers that might be within my directory that I would like to add, and I can go ahead and add them. Now, right up here at the top, here's my Add to Contacts, and then I also get this More button. Now, before I show you those, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check a couple of these people here. So I have Barney, Betty, and Daisy, and you'll see again I can add to my contacts. So this would just kind of allow me to add them as my favorites or my contacts. But the one right next to it allows me to make them a group. And so if I click on groups right there, I can go ahead and create a new group. And let's call them my webinar group, just to keep it a little bit separate. And when I say OK, now I have a webinar group over here that has 3 people in it, which are Daisy, Betty, and Barney. So if I compose a message and I type in to webinar, it will automatically pull those 3 people in because they're part of that group or that distribution list, as we are used to calling it. So that's really helpful. Now you're also going to notice that they might be in more than one distribution list or group. So over here, I've put them in my webinar group, but they're also in my Period 1 group. So that's really neat because with Google, you don't have to pick just one. You can have them be part of your whole staff group, and then you can also have them be just part of your grade 3 group, for instance. So that's really nice. And that's where all of these things happen. Now, if you kind of forget about that icon up here, down here where it says New Group, you can also use this option, click on New Group, type in your group, and then you can add them just by checking their boxes. So under this contacts part is where kind of all that happens, where you can create it, and then once you create it, it saves within your account. When you go back to Mail, you can go ahead and compose a message, and it will automatically go to those people that you've added for your group. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about tasks, other than to tell you that there is a tasks part of Gmail. You can have it where if you'd like to create a to-do list, you can go ahead and click on this little plus sign. You can make a little to-do list. This will show up if you choose. It will show up in your Google Calendar. So if this is kind of something, if you use Google Calendar a lot and you're looking for something to kind of keep track of the things that you're doing, or like a to-do list type of thing, this is a really nice option to use because it's already built in. And then you would just go to Google Calendar and go ahead and turn it on, and then you would see it within your calendar. So here's my trash can. If I wanted to trash it, then I can go ahead and push this out, give it a due date, put it to notes. I can even move it to a specific list if I wanted to. So something neat that's already built in to Gmail that you can feel free to use. All right, so the next thing I'm going to go ahead and talk about are the settings within Gmail. So if you are a user of Google, you probably have seen in a lot of the Google apps, they always have this little gear up in the top corner. So we see that in Drive, we see that, in lots of the different applications. And same thing as Gmail, this little gear indicates that I can go ahead and click on it and click on Settings. Now, once I get to settings, I'm faced with a whole bunch of different settings. So we're going to take a look at these during this webinar. Now, up at the top, I can see that I can increase my maximum page size. Like maybe I only want to see 10 messages per page, or maybe I want to only see a certain number of contacts per page. You can do images, always display external images, or ask before displaying external images. You may, if this is turned off, you may always get like emails that say, would you like to display these images and so forth. And this is where you can go ahead and turn that on and off. Hopefully your default reply behavior does say just reply and not reply all, but that's something to check, and you certainly can change it there. Here's your default text style. So if you have a preference, you really like Comic Sans, or you really like one of these other ones. You can go ahead and change that, as well as you can increase the size of your text or color when you send out your messages. This next one here, conversation, this is a really important one that I am going to show you when I go back to my Gmail account, because this is one that I think a lot of people get confused on. And so this one is called Conversation View. So if you're looking at your account, you may see that your conversation view is turned on or turned off. Now, if it's turned on, what that means is, and I'm just going to give an example. Let's say that Wilma has sent a message, an email, to Fred, and Fred replied, and then Wilma replied, and then Fred replied, and then Wilma replied. So it's kind of like a whole conversation where each person maybe sent, 2 or 3 messages back and forth. What happens, and I'm going to hop out of my settings just to show you what that looks like, and I'll just say okay there. What happens is right here, because Conversation View is turned on, what that does is it groups all of those messages together, and it just puts it as one straight line. So in other words, if I click on this, I will be able to see Fred says yabba dabba doo, and Wilma said it's good to hear from you, Fred. So they're having a conversation, but yet in my email, in my inbox, it's labeled as one line. Some people love that. Some people hate that. If you love it, you can keep your conversation view turned on. If you don't like it, you can go back to settings and you can turn it off. And when you turn it off, what that means is I'll go ahead and click on Save Changes so you can see it change. Here's my Save Changes down at the bottom. You can see it change right here. Here's Fred, yabba dabba doo, and Wilma's is probably in the sent mail. So it labels each message as an individual line. So that's what that means, and again, that's just kind of your personal preference, but that is one that either is turned on or turned off, and a lot of people don't really understand how to turn it on and off, and that's where you can go ahead and go to change that. Conversation View on and Conversation View off. We are going to circle back and talk about these stars in a little bit, but these stars are helpful if you want to star certain messages, maybe kind of like categorize them a little bit. So we will come back to this at towards the end of this webinar. I just kind of want to talk about a few other things down here. Here's your picture. Of course, you certainly can change picture at any point in time. You could put your own picture in there. And then your signature. This is always one that, when I teach a Gmail class, I always encourage people to put a signature on. No matter if this is your personal account or your work-related account. Go ahead and put some kind of signature in. You can put images in your signature. You can put links. You can change the color. You can put bullets. You can put all kinds of different things in that signature box, but go ahead and do that. If you scroll down a little bit more towards the bottom, you have your vacation responder, so you can turn that on and off. Regardless of what you change in this window, you do want to make sure that you click on Save Changes. Google saves everything for you automatically. However, in this screen, you do have to click on Save Changes, otherwise it won't save it for you. So just make sure that you go ahead and do that if you are looking at some of those settings. One last thing I'll mention, I'm just going to scroll up here just for a second before we get out of this page right here, is, and it's kind of hidden, I guess, in a way, or maybe people kind of skip over it. It's called Undo Send. And what this means is if you want to enable this, you can, or you can turn it off. But what this means is if you click this box, and you can certainly decide what type of time limit you want on it. But if you enable Undo Send and you send cancellation period, let's say 10 seconds, when you send a message, up at the top of Gmail, it will be like a little ribbon that will say, do you want to undo? Do you want to undo? Do you want to undo? And then if you're like, oh my gosh, I misspelled something, or I clicked send too fast and I didn't want to do that, you can go ahead and undo it, undo send, and it won't send the message. But it's contingent on however long you put seconds-wise in this little field right here. Again, you can just turn that on and off by checking that box. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Save Changes here, and we're going to go ahead and look at the next part of Gmail. So we talked about some of those settings. And the next thing that I'm going to talk about is when I compose a message. So I'm going to go ahead and start a message up. So I'm going to click on that red button that says Compose. Now, you probably are aware you get your CC and BCC here, so I can go ahead and CC people or BCC, and of course, here's my subject. Down here, down at the bottom, here's where I can attach files. Your paperclip is going to be for PDF files, maybe picture files, video files, things like that. Here's your insert files from Google Drive. So if I wanted to insert something from Google Drive, I can go ahead and just click on this and it will pull up the current account, Wilma's account, that I can go ahead and attach something and send it to, whoever I was emailing. This is money related, of course, you're inserting photos. Insert links. I love using this insert link button because when I click on insert link, and I'll just say, let me just type in Google here, and I'll type in www.google.com. Now, it would be easier for me to go out to the website first, copy it, and paste it in this box, but when I just say okay, I like how it looks really clean. So whoever I send this message to, they're not going to see the whole www. And if it's a really long URL, then they don't have to see that whole entire thing. Whereas I just type in text and they click on it and it goes out to google.com. So I really enjoy using that link part. Of course, you can do emojis and everything else, and here's your trash can. So you do have lots of things at the bottom of your messages when you go ahead and send them out. You also may or may not have noticed that you get this little drop-down arrow in the corner when you compose a new message, and it says More Options. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up. So, of course, I can print it. I can check spelling. Sometimes I get that question, where can I check my spelling in my messages? So that's where that is. I do want to talk about this label right here. Now, we haven't talked about labels too much yet, but I am just going to preface with the fact that let's say you're using something different than Gmail right now, and you're probably used to putting things in folders or tucking them away somewhere. Well, what Gmail has is the option to use labels. And when you use a label, you're kind of like tagging it with a word. But the thing with a label is that you can apply more than one label. And so here's an example. Let's say I'm a teacher and I'm in charge of cheerleading and I also teach 3rd grade. Well, if a parent emails me and the first paragraph talks about math and then the second paragraph talks about cheerleading, I'm stuck because if I was using something else, I really wouldn't know which folder to put it in. However, with Gmail, I can actually apply both labels. So if I wanted to tag it with the label cheerleading, and then I also wanted to tag it with the label like 3rd grade parents or something, I can do that. So what's really neat about this option here is if I'm sending out a message, I can label that message first before I send it out. Whereas then if people respond to me or reply, their replies will automatically be tagged with that label too. So if I wanted to tag it with summer reading, I'll go ahead and just check this box, summer reading, and I send out this message, then whoever replies to it, it'll automatically be labeled that. Now you can see over here, and we'll get into this a little bit more, but you can see over here, these are all labels. So 2016, 2017, EdSite, these are labels. They're still in my inbox, so I can still see them, but it's tagged with that label, and then here's another one. So again, what's really nice about those labels is the fact that I can go ahead and make it more than one, and then that way when I send it out, it's already applied. So I don't have to wait until I get it, then to file it away. So that's what's really nice. Okay, moving on to the next thing, and again, we'll get more into that labels part in just a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and talk about labels a little bit more and talk about how you can tag them with stars and tag them as important. Now, if you look over here in my little list, I have a star and I also have this other shape right here. Now, if I go back to my settings, I'm going to go back to my little gear over here and I'm going to go back to settings. And you saw, and I told you we would go back to this, you saw right here where it says stars. So I can go ahead and apply any of these stars that I want to use in my Gmail account. So let's say I'm going to move these around. Let's say I didn't really want to use this one. I didn't really want to use this one. Maybe I'll just kind of toggle back and forth. So it says in use, and I have these stars, and not in use, and I have these. So if I go down here, and I'm going to save this, I'm going to save my changes because I always have to do that. If I go back to my list and I want to star this Pear Deck Team message, so I can go ahead and click one time and it becomes this little like yellowish orange star. If I click it again, I can go ahead and now it's red. If I click it again, now it's purple. If I click it again, so it's going to cycle through all of those types of stars that I indicated over here in settings. So this is a great way to kind of organize your messages in ways that maybe red means it's super important, maybe yellow means, well, it's secondary, and maybe purple means something, something else. And you could make up whatever kind of system you want. But you have the ability to use all of these if you want to, and then just in your messages, you kind of just keep clicking and it'll change the colors for you. Now with the importance part, over here in my settings, if I click on, and so I've been on general this whole entire time. If I click on inbox, which I'm skipping over labels here just for a second, if I click on inbox, now I get some other extra things. And so I'm going to skip over this first part of categories just for now, and I'm going to go down to importance markers. And so depending on if this is turned on or off for you, if it is turned off, you certainly can turn it on where it says show markers. And I'm going to say save changes, and mine was already turned on, so it's not letting me save it. When I click on cancel, what happens is these right here, these are importance markers. And these are really awesome with Gmail because if I'm getting messages from administrators, if I'm getting messages from parents, if I'm getting messages from, important people, I can click this little icon right here, and it says this conversation has been marked as important. So now if EdSite team or an administrator or Fred Flintstone, anybody that's tagged as important, if the messages from those people start to come in more, Gmail will automatically know that I tagged it one time or maybe 2 times as important or important people, and it will automatically tag it as an important message when it comes in like the 2nd or 3rd or 4th time. So you're kind of like training Gmail to learn your system. So if you use these stars and you use these importance markers, then it'll kind of start to remember all of those things, and when those people email you, it will automatically pop up with that. And, if you get a lot of messages every day, some of these things are really helpful because they help you organize and they help you keep tabs on the things that, you have going on. Of course, you always, if things, don't work out or whatever, if you go down here, you always have your spam over here. If things get caught in the spam, you can go ahead and check one of these boxes and you can say, hey, these are not spam, and then Google will remove them from spam, and again, you're training it so that anytime you get messages from these people, Google will start to remember that those are not spam, and then they won't put them back in your spam folder. So just ways around just kind of managing your email. All right, so next thing, I'm just kind of going down my list here. The next thing is labels. So let me pull back up our labels so we can talk about that a little bit more. So I'm going to go back to my settings, and if you've noticed, I keep going back and forth to my settings. So if nothing else, just kind of remember that gear up in the top corner and going down to settings, because that's where you're going to find a lot of this information. So I'm going to go back to settings, and if you notice, we were on general before, and we hopped over labels to get to inbox. This time, we're going to go ahead and click right on labels. Now, I told you the definition of labels was the fact that if we got an email from a parent that had to do with cheerleading and also something about grade 3, I can apply 2 different labels. And so my recommendation for labels, and you have unlimited storage space in your educational account for Google entirely, not just Gmail, for Google entirely. So you can feel free to create as many labels as you want to. Sometimes it's helpful to create a label and name it like 2016, 2017, maybe next school year, 2017, 2018. I have a label from EdSite. I have a label from Google Classroom. I love making this label. If you use Google Classroom, I would recommend using or creating a label named Google Classroom, because if you're getting notifications from Google Classroom, it's helpful to have that to where you can just kind of group them all together to where they're not, they keep coming in your inbox. And I'm going to show you in a little bit, we're going to kind of piggyback off labels, and we're going to talk about filters to where you can tell Gmail, hey, every time I get a message from Google Classroom, I don't want to delete it, but I want it to just automatically go to a label or automatically go to a certain spot. So kind of keep that in mind as we're moving forward, labels into filters, because again, you can kind of train it to every time it gets a message from a certain person or a certain, EdSite or parent emails or whatever, you can tell it to go somewhere, and that's called a filter. But for now, if we're going to talk about labels, we can go ahead and create another label, and I like how you can nest label under. So for instance, let me click on cancel here for a second. if I created the parent label 2016, 2017, or if I was looking ahead to next year, I could do 2017, 2018, and then I can create underneath that, here's a label called EdSite, there's a label called Google Classroom, there's a label called, so you get the idea, where I have like one parent label and then these are all nested underneath the 2016, 2017. That's really helpful because over here, this is where all your labels are located. And you can see right next to 2016, 2017, you can see this little caret, this little drop-down menu, Collapse Label. So if I collapse it, now I don't see those extra ones. And so if you're trying to, again, organize your Gmail, sometimes if you have a lot of labels, you may, see them all listed over here, and maybe you don't want to see all of them all the time. So if you nest them under, you can kind of like tuck them away and only see the ones that you want to at any given time. So that's really nice. Now, if I wanted to apply a label, like let's say these 3 messages have to do with EdSite, so I'm going to go ahead and apply the EdSite label. I already have that label created, and it's already underneath the 2016-2017 label. So what I can do once those boxes are checked, I can go up here, look, it says labels, it looks like a little label up there, that little icon. I can just drop down this box and it's already checked. But like if it wasn't checked, I can go ahead and just check that box and say apply, and then it would go ahead and apply that label for those messages. So that's really nice. But keep in mind right here, now I can apply more than one label. So I can check all of them if I want to. When I click on apply, it applied all of those labels to those messages. Now, what you're probably realizing at this point, though, is I have applied these labels, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 labels on these 3 messages, but yet they're still in my inbox. So they're still labeled under my inbox. If you like that, fine. If you don't like that, you can go ahead, and let me go back here because I clicked on this message. You can go ahead, if these boxes are checked, I can go ahead then at this point and move them to another spot so they're not in my inbox. Google has it made where you can apply a label and keep them in your inbox if you want to, but if you're used to just kind of tagging them with a label and then getting them out of your inbox, you can do that too, where you then would have to move them to, and notice how they're all named the same thing, but when this time if I move them, then they're going to be removed from my inbox. So just keep in mind that you have both of those options. You can apply a label, keep them as your inbox, or go ahead and move them out. Now, in any case, and this happens to me all the time because we use Gmail at work, where you might kind of move them out and then think like, oh gosh, where are they? Like, I don't remember where I put them. So if I click on inbox here, of course, I'm not going to see them because if I move them out, you do have the ability down here underneath more. I'm going to drop this down and I get lots of extra stuff, including my spam and my trash. Right here where it says all mail. If I click on this, I will now see all of my messages regardless of where I move them to. So all mail is just going to pull everything from every label, from every folder, everywhere you have, and now you can go ahead and find it, whereas your inbox is only going to show the things that you have in your inbox. So just some really helpful things. I would encourage you to use labels just because it helps kind of get organized with, all the things that you're doing. And again, incorporating those stars and the importance markers and all of those things. Now, in addition to all of those things, you can also, and I use this feature a lot too, up in the top, because Google's known for its searches, you can also search your mail. And so if you, let's say you forget that you can click on more and then go to all mail, you can also go up to the top and just type in, like I'm going to type in EdSite. And I'm going to click on enter, and it's going to pull all of my EdSite messages that I've received from EdSite, from somebody talking about EdSite, an assignment from EdSite or whatnot. So it's allowing me to do that. Now I also get this drop-down arrow, show search options. And again, this is going to be, you have the same thing in Google Drive, you have the same thing in a lot of the other ones where you can search your Drive, you can search your Gmail. If I click on that drop-down menu, I can be more specific. Maybe I only want to search my inbox, maybe I only want to search my spam, maybe I only want to search, certain things. I love this, though, has the words. And so if you type in, like, I know I got this message from a parent and it was about cheerleading, but I don't remember who it was from and I don't remember what date it came in. You can type in certain words that they might have used in that email and click on search, and chances are Gmail will find that message for you. So you really don't have to remember you don't have to have all of these things filled in. You just have to have, maybe one or two things filled in, and then click on search, and then Gmail will go ahead and search for you those messages. All right, so great things using that search. I love using that search. I use it all the time. All right, so the next thing that kind of brings us to is our filters. So when we talk about filters, and the example I talked about just a little bit earlier was if you get messages from Google Classroom, if you get messages from, parents, if you get messages from people and maybe Scholastic, maybe you get a lot of messages from somebody, and of course you don't want to trash them, you want to keep them, but you don't necessarily have to see them all the time. You don't need to see them coming into your email, or you just kind of want to label them right away. You want to tag them right away and have them go where they need to go. So you can go ahead and create a filter. So I'm going to leave this word EdSite, right? Well, you know what, I'll change this. I'll make this be Google Classroom. So I'll say Google Classroom right up at the top. And so it's going to search for all of my messages that have to do with Google Classroom. And so at this point, I'm going to go ahead and click on this Show Search Options. And when I do that, it's going to find all my Google Classroom, emails. And way down here in the corner, it says Create Filter with this search. So when I click on Create Filter with this search, it's saying, okay, Christy, you found all of these messages that have to do with Google Classroom, and now you want to create a filter. What do you want to do with it? So I'm simply going to answer some of these questions. It says, okay, when a message arrives that matches this search. So it's saying when a message comes in that's, has Google Classroom somewhere in it. So all those notifications that Classroom gives you, that somebody turned in their work or, whatever. Of course, again, I don't want to delete them, but maybe if I have 100 students, I don't need to see them come in all the time. So what I can do is I can skip the inbox and archive it, which would kind of be like deleting it. So I may not want to do that. But what I can do is I can apply the label. So automatically when messages come in from Google Classroom, I can apply the label, and I'm just going to drop this menu down, and I'm going to apply the label Google Classroom. So that anytime it comes in, it's tagged with that label Google Classroom. Now you can also do lots of other things. Delete it, you can forward it, you can always mark it as important. So if messages are coming in from people that are important, you can always mark it that way. You can categorize it as never marked as important. There's lots of other things you can do here. If you do want to skip the inbox, you can do that. Just make sure that you do apply that label, and that way it's easier to find later. The one thing that I really like, or I shouldn't say the one thing, another thing that I really like about filters is way down here in the corner, it says, hey, I found an extra 50 messages that match this criteria. Do you want to also apply that filter to these 50 messages? So at this point, if you check that box and create the filter, now what it's going to do is it's going to pull all those messages, and any message that was from Google Classroom, here's my classroom, labeled classroom, it's going to automatically tag them with that label. So again, really nice feature. I didn't really do too much. All I did was set it up, and then it automatically will do it. Now, any new messages that will come in labeled from Google Classroom, it's going to automatically put that label on, as well as any message that I had in my inbox. Maybe I have 1,000 messages in my inbox. It will find all of those messages and apply that label automatically just because I checked that box. So really neat part. Again, that's just creating a filter just by using that search up at the top. You can go ahead and do that. You also can go to your settings over here in my little gear settings, and you can get to filters here as well. You don't have to only just use your search bar. That's just how we did it. But if I clicked on filters here, here's also that filter where I can go ahead and edit it, or if I want to delete it, I can do that too. So really, really neat. All right, so that brings us to labs. Now, if you've never heard of labs before, so again, I'm going to get to labs underneath that little gear and settings, and here's labs. Now, so what I like the verbiage up here. It says our NOACA, and then it says some crazy experimental stuff. And so what that basically means is that these are labs that are out there that you can install and have for your Gmail. Now, there's other labs like Calendar has some, and some other applications have labs. But basically, what they say is that these are things that you can use, but at any time they may or may not break, or they may or may not disappear, or things like that. But what's neat about these labs, and the ones that I'm going to show you today, these labs have been around for a long time, and I use them, so they're really good. I don't really anticipate them going away. But there's all kinds of different labs that are out there. And so you can just kind of look through the different labs that are there, or you can just search up at the top for a lab that you may want to install. So the two that I'm going to show you today, well, actually we're going to talk about three, but we'll start with just two. And the first one is, it's called the Right Side Chat. And so if I just type this in, Right Side Chat, so here it is, and I'm going to enable it. So when I enable it, I'm going to have to click on Save Changes. What that does on my main screen for Wilma, before my chat was located over here, and I didn't really like it because it kind of like went over top of all my labels and all my things over here, and it was really getting hard for me to see them. So I installed the Right Side Chat, and what that did is it pushed the chat over to the other side, and now I can chat with people, and I can also see all of my labels over here without really anything being on top of each other. So that's called the Right Side Chat. So again, that is a label. I can go back to my little gear, click on Settings again, and go back to Labs. If I don't like it, I can just disable it, and it will go away. It will go back to the way it was before. The second lab that I'm going to show you is called the Google Calendar one. And so here's the Google Calendar gadget. So once again, this is disabled by default. I'm going to go ahead and click on Enable. And so once I do that, I'm going to click on Save Changes again. And then now what I'm going to see over on my main screen is over here. Of course, I just moved my chat over to the other side, but now I replaced it with my calendar. And so now my calendar is over here. So this is pulling from Wilma's calendar. And so here it is. And it's showing me a little tiny little Google Calendar in addition to my Gmail. And so I can always make it a little bit bigger. I can drag it up if I want to, put it kind of over the labels. I can do that. But what's really nice about this is it gives me a little overview of maybe the things that are in my calendar while I'm still doing email. If I needed to see if I'm available or something and then respond to somebody, I don't have to completely get out of email. I can just check it on my Google Calendar. So once again, that is, if I go back to my little gear and settings, that was a lab. That one was just called Google Calendar Gadget. So if you don't like that, you can disable it as well, and then it will go away. Nothing in here is set in stone. I mean, you can enable and disable as many times as you want to. Try it out. If you don't like it, just turn it off. All right, so another lab that we're going to talk about is called Multiple Inboxes. And I have mine enabled. If you don't have it enabled and you want to try it, once again, you're going to go ahead and just search for it and click on Enable. And this one is a little bit different because what this one does is when you enable it, it actually puts multiple inboxes right up here in my settings. So just to kind of show you from start to finish, if I go back to my inbox, and if I've enabled that multiple inboxes, if I go back to my gear, back to my settings, I now have this option to click on multiple inboxes. So just by turning it on, it automatically put itself up here. That's different than the calendar and the Right Side Chat. What this does is this allows me to kind of customize my home page of Gmail. And so what I mean by that is if there are, like, I have a Google Classroom label, I have a parent email label, I have a summer reading label, I have all kinds of different labels. If there are some labels or some messages that I have to see right away, like I don't want to have to even make another click before looking at them, I can make it be so that they are part of my multiple inboxes. And so I'll show you what that looks like. So right over here, let me go back to my, let's go back to my mail here real quick. And I'm going to just search for those Google Classroom messages. So here it is, Google Classroom. And I'm going to go ahead and see it says label. I'm going to click on that label right there. And I'm just going to highlight this still label : 2016-2017 Google Classroom, because I actually want it to, the verbiage to be exactly how it is inside my labels. And so now at this point, I'm going to go back to my settings, go back to my gear, back to my settings, and then where it says multiple inboxes, I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in. So with these multiple inboxes, when I go ahead and set these up, what this will do, so for example, I have is 2016-2017 Google Classroom, and then the panel title is Google Classroom. Now over here, or I should say down here, it says extra panels positioned. So I have right side of the inbox, above the inbox, below the inbox. I'm going to put it on the right side because this is the most noticeable. I'm going to click on Save Changes. Now, it looks a little messy, but what happens is I'm able to see like my inbox, plus I'm able to see the 2016-2017 label. I'm also able to see the parent label. It's kind of covered up a little bit. And then I can also see the Google Classroom label. Now, the reason why, and again, it looks messy if you've never used this before, but the reason why you might want to consider doing this is if there's like 3 or 5 or 10, whatever, labels that you want to see all at the same time. So in other words, you don't want to have to keep clicking around over here to pull them up individually. Rather, you want to go to your first screen and see everything at the same time. So I see my inbox, I see EdSite, and then I see Google Classroom. You can do that with what's called multiple inboxes. And so when you turn them on, that just basically turns them on your home screen or on your Gmail home screen so that you can see everything at the beginning. Now, if you're looking at this like, oh my gosh, Christy, it's not for me, I don't really like it, you can simply just go back to your settings and go ahead and turn it off. But know that you have that option. You may not want like EdSite and Google Classroom to be up there. Maybe instead you want to put like your important messages up there, or you want to put any starred messages up there. You can do that too. So you can decide like which inbox or which label you want to put out there so that you can go ahead and see it. You also have the ability, mine's set to 3 conversations per page, but you have the ability to, of course, increase that if you want that to be more messages per page. And then you can decide if you want on the right side, above the inbox, or below the inbox. Again, if you're looking at this thinking like, I don't really like the right side, I'll show you what the below the inbox works. And this is the one that I usually use because I'll look at my inbox, and then when I scroll down through all my inbox messages, here's where now it says 2016, 2017, and then it says parents. So it's kind of just giving me like a whole big picture of all my important messages, all my important labels, all the things that I want tagged, without me having to go clicking around everywhere and finding them. So once again, that's called the multiple inboxes. Once you have it turned on as a lab, you can go ahead and configure it just by clicking on multiple inboxes there, and then go ahead and add and delete and whatnot, the ones that you want to go ahead and put in there. All right, last couple things before we'll go ahead and wrap up. Gmail offline, I just want to very quickly mention that I'm still in my settings under the gear. I'm going to go ahead and click on offline. This is something that not a lot of people know about. You can install Gmail offline on the computer that you use every day. Make sure you don't install it on like a public computer, but you can go ahead and install Gmail offline on your own computer. And then when you're like, let's say you're on a plane, traveling somewhere on vacation, or, you're somewhere at a basketball game or football game where you don't have a Wi-Fi connection or you're not hardwired in, you can go ahead and type up email messages. And then whenever you get to your Wi-Fi connection or whenever you get plugged in, they will go ahead and send out if you're ready to send them out. So you can go ahead and draft them up and then send out. So if you install or use Gmail offline, and Drive is also available offline too. So I always like to mention that because sometimes people don't realize that, and that's just in your settings where you can go ahead and click on it and go ahead and install it. All right, the last thing here is just a couple extra features, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up with this webinar. 2 extra features that I'll just talk about, again, still in my settings. One of them is your forwarding of your mail. And again, just a common question that I usually get during these Gmail sessions is if you have a couple different accounts and you want all of your mail to go to one account so that you're not checking, 5 or 6 different accounts. Under this settings, here's your forwarding and POP IMAP. If I click on add forwarding address right here, I can type in whatever address that I want forwarded to, like if your district has a couple different accounts or whatever, you can go ahead and do that. It will send like a test message or a test confirmation message to you to make sure that is your actual account. You're going to have to okay it. And then once you okay it, it'll go ahead and start forwarding to that address. So lots of times people will do this like over the summer. If you, you know, have a personal account, you don't want to miss any school mail or whatever, it's good, you know, just to kind of keep tabs on things that are going on at school. Or if you have, if your district does have two accounts, like one for teachers and one for students, you can forward it. But just know that you have that option. And then the last thing under settings is this themes, this whole area of themes. My screen is white, but you can go ahead and set your theme if you'd like it to be something different, where you want a different background. Of course, you can change these at any point in time. You can even bring in your own photos if you want your background to be something different. So you can go ahead and change that too. So lots of things. I guess kind of moral of the story is if you have any questions or you want to change anything, chances are your options are all going to be under that gear, under settings. Just go ahead and click on settings, and that's where everything is, including the labs, including your inbox, your labels, your general, you know, and all of that information. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and pull back my presentation here, and I'm going to end with this last slide, and I'll present this here. The last slide indicates, of course, if you want a copy of this presentation, there's the link for that. We did talk about our GEG group and also our Tech Tuesday tips. So those are the shortened links for both of those items. If you want to get involved with either one of those, just go ahead and visit those links, and feel free to sign up. And then last thing is for the CEU information. If you've sat through one of our webinars before, this is kind of the same thing. For our CEU certificates, within about 24 hours, we say, so usually about tomorrow morning when you get to work, you'll have an email from our NOACA system that will have a link to the evaluation for this webinar. Once you fill out that evaluation, it'll go ahead and ask for your name and all that stuff, and that information will be put onto your CEU certificate, and then your CEU certificate will then be emailed directly to you. So again, once you wait for that first email that comes with the evaluation, and then once you fill that out, you'll go ahead and get your CEU certificate. If you guys have any questions or comments, I will stay in the chat box and stay on here for about 5 minutes or so. Otherwise, I hope this webinar was helpful about Gmail tips and tricks and settings, and I look forward to seeing you again in another NOACA webinar. Thank you for attending.